I've never designed a video game, nor have I ever run a company that has ever earned revenue beyond a few meager thousands of dollars. So this entire conversation, Bryan Weedai, is really an exercise in game theory and business design.
Mm-hmm.
You cool with that?
Yeah, I have to be. You want to talk about it, Rich? We got to go to it.
So, and I want to preface this by saying the sort of the opposite sides of what I'm talking about. I'm not suggesting one is better than the other, or one is good and one is bad.
Really,
or
you don't have one without the other, right?
Well, let's just start talking, and we'll see where this goes. So here's the thing. I would think, Bryan Weedai, that everybody agrees that FIFA 16 is a good sports video game. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I think so. FIFA is generally believed to be good, maybe not great, or it's good in certain areas and not so much others. But we also have a game to compare it against, which is different than most of the others.
And I would say that everybody would say that NBA 2K16 is a good video game.
Yeah, there are issues there as well, with one mode in particular that doesn't work still, but otherwise I think people are exceptionally high on NBA 2K.
Right. And again, with anything, whether it's a sports team, a video game, a vehicle, a cruise ship, like no matter how good or bad something is, there's going to be stuff that people have different ideas about or concerns about or issues with. So the thing that I've been thinking about recently is, we've had a lot of conversations about both FIFA and NBA 2K16, and I'm trying to determine why the two games seem to be going in the different paths that they're going. Now, we've talked quite a bit about how NBA 2K16 has taken and continues to take big risks and to do things differently and think outside the box and really do more every year than other games seem to do. Right?
Yeah, they are structured very differently, especially in what the designers are working on each year and what modes they're building and what new features they're putting in. I think you do see different philosophies there.
Absolutely.
And these are the two biggest games in the world, and it's pretty interesting that they're doing things so differently along the way. I think you're right about that.
And FIFA, while, again, FIFA is a big game, there's a lot to do, but I don't get the sense from anybody that FIFA is taking chances or thinking outside the box or doing things bigger, bolder than other people. Right? Would you agree with that as well?
Yeah, well, I think
even people who like FIFA, even FIFA 16 fans, like big supporters of which there are many.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, and I think they are adding certain things in there that you could say otherwise, like the women's national teams, but also the reasoning for why they're doing that is similar to the reasoning for why they're doing other things, which is how are we going to increase sales and how are we going to increase revenue down the line, long term, not just short term, also.
Right.
And so you can see kind of why they're making those decisions and maybe why they're not doing other things.
And I like both games. I genuinely enjoy both of these games. In the last couple of years, I've tended to be more NBA than FIFA, but I've certainly played and will continue to play plenty of FIFA, particularly against, friends and people that I know. So it's interesting when you look at the underlying context of both games. Some things stand out. Number one, Electronic Arts, the company, for the last 3 to 4 years has been profitable again.
Oh, yeah.
For a few years before the last few years, they were not profitable. And in fact, their profits have been going up pretty significantly the last couple of years and are projected for this year to be up even more, thanks to a combination of many things.
And their stock is at, or it may not be at the moment, but it's gotten to all-time highs earlier this year, at least. So
that's right.
It's the culmination of what they've been building towards for years, and it finally got over that hump, and that's what it's at now.
Which is a strong, repeatable portfolio, a significant amount of digital revenue, and being able to reduce costs and increase, revenue, with margins that really over time, as you increase efficiencies, really build upon themselves. So when you look at FIFA as a part of revenue, and a couple different sources I got this from, basically FIFA accounts for, depending upon which analyst you specifically tie yourselves to, anywhere between 28 to 33% of the entire profit of Electronic Arts.
Wow.
Almost a third, somewhere between more than a quarter and a third of the profits, right, of the entire company. And you're talking about a company that generates $4 billion in revenue. Okay, not profit, but revenue. Profit is estimated to be somewhere between 800 million and a billion this year, which would be, again, dramatically better than years before. Mm-hmm. When you look at NBA 2K16, it is a profitable game by all estimations. They ship, and by the way, NBA 2K16 and 2K Sports is owned by a company called Take-Two. They shipped 4 million copies. They'll probably sell, 8 to 10 million copies of NBA 2K16? Is that a fair number, do you think, Bryan?
Last year would have been around 7 million. They topped 7 million. So, and projections now are definitely above that, because it opened stronger than last year, and I think we're legitimately looking at 8+ million this year.
Right, and it's by all estimates a very profitable venture for the company. Yet, what's interesting about Take-Two, NBA 2K16 and the NBA 2K franchise may be a profit machine, relatively speaking, for Take-Two. Yet, guess how many copies of Grand Theft Auto 5 have been sold, Bryan Weed? And by the way, Grand Theft Auto Prize is a property of Take-Two, which owns 2K Sports.
Yeah, well, it's not a yearly title, so obviously it has a longer tail and it's on more platforms and multiple generations. But I think, what are we talking, 30, 40 million?
Estimates are at 54 million right now. 54 million copies of Grand Theft Auto. So you juxtapose FIFA, basically a third of all profit.
Yeah.
And NBA 2K16 might be the most profitable little machine, but is so much smaller in scale to the entire company's efforts. To me, that was like the moment when I realized that explains it all, because EA can absolutely not afford to make a mistake with FIFA, whereby Take-Two Sports could withstand completely an absolute debacle from NBA 2K and be none the wiser. Doesn't it all make sense now?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's a sense of FIFA's at a point where you don't want to mess it up. It's raking in money every year. It's selling 15 million copies every year, and you're getting hundreds of millions in digital revenue. But then on the other end of things over at 2K, you have a game where maybe they have more freedom to creatively come up with different ideas and build out those different ideas, because they can take those chances and they can kind of go for a prestige feel with the game, as far as, it's more of a cultural thing now, and that allows them to expand to mobile and expand their partnerships with other companies. And it in the end, it ends up building towards more, but they do have that freedom.
Isn't it kind of amazing, right? Because we've heard the guys talk about it. They talk about it on press row when they come on. There's going to be more conversations we're going to have with guys like, Scott O'Gallagher and Jazar, and they say that to a man, like they tell us. And I don't think it's just PR speak. I think they're being completely open and honest when they say we've got a lot of freedom to take a lot of ideas pretty far. And it's amazing that you can work in an environment where that can be fostered versus potentially an environment where, yes, obviously you have to, as the FIFA team, you feel great that you're basically driving the bus. A third, between a quarter and a third of all of your company's profit is directly because of what you do. But also, can you imagine the pressure on that team? They, boy, to be able to take a chance, you really have to design your game with a business analytical acumen versus one where, as long as you're profitable and, the more the better, but still, you're not driving the bus, it really, to me, again, explains a lot of the decisions. And I'm not saying one is good and one is bad, one is evil, one is, virtuous, right? It's just an interesting way to look at these games, and a lot of things make a lot more sense when you use that sort of as the context.
So what do you think the role of both of these games are? They're maybe the only ones that have a competing game in that sport. So there's Pro Evolution Soccer and there's NBA Live. Now, how much you want to consider that competition is to be debated, because NBA Live only sells 2%. NBA 2K owns 98% of the basketball gaming market. So NBA Live is there, but it's not competition. Pro Evolution Soccer, on the other hand, they have a decent market share, particularly in certain regions around the world. But it's not really nipping at their heels in terms of sales or revenue. So with those things in mind, do you think that having those other games there is affecting any decisions that are taking place with these two games?
Well, I don't think it is with NBA 2K, and if it is at all, it's going to be in FIFA, and I'll tell you why. Number one, NBA 2K basically got a 3-year break from NBA Live. NBA Live and NBA 2K are playing in different leagues right now, and I don't even mean that as I'm not being a jerk about NBA Live. NBA Live is a perfectly functional and in some cases pretty darn good basketball game. But, compared to NBA 2K, they're operating in different worlds. So I don't think NBA 2K16 is looking at much of anything that NBA Live is doing and making decisions against that. FIFA is a more interesting case. FIFA has one of the reasons, right, that FIFA has ascended to the level that it has is because of all of the licenses that it has, right? And it got,
that's true. Yeah.
Right. And it took, or not took, but certainly has walled off Pro Evolution from getting many of those licenses. And I also think, particularly in the last year or so, since Pro Evolution debuted on the PS4 and Xbox One consoles, that they've been forced to look at how the game is played. So because again, and I think these are intertwined, because of the importance that FIFA has in the revenue, in the net, in the income statement of EA as a organization, the fact that they have competition that is much closer to it in gameplay than NBA Live, and the fact that they have to spend money to have licenses, in part to prevent the competition, definitely plays a factor. Now, whether that ultimately means anything in game design choices or as just sort of the ownership of licenses and not is curious. But again, I mean, if Pro Evolution had some sort of revolutionary mode that had somewhat the same effect that the original Jordan mode had when was it NBA 2K11, that would, I would think, make like the EA guys quake in their boots. So I think they're certainly enjoying the fact that Konami, talking about parent companies, Konami, Pro Evolution's publisher, is in a transitional phase, although they have every indication they made is that the Pro Evolution franchise of any of their console franchises is strong and will continue.
Yeah, here's what I see, Rich, just before we move on real quick. I see NBA 2K trying to squash NBA Live with their product, by hitting on every possible feature and things that appeal to pretty much everyone. Because it's probably the strongest feature set in any sports game ever this year in NBA 2K, giving people very little reason to look at the alternative. FIFA, I think you're right. It's external factors, it's licenses, it's branding, and it's loyalty. There's probably no more battle between franchises over the years that has meant more in terms of loyalty with who sticks to a certain game. Despite whether one is considered to be better than the other, than FIFA versus Pro Evolution, it seemed like every forum you would go to, there was kind of a battle there. You haven't seen that with other games, at least this generation or even last generation. You'd have to go back to PS2 to have that Madden versus NFL 2K battles, but even that was new. That was only a year or two old. This is a decade old. So, so it's people are kind of entrenched there. but FIFA kind of sticks with what they have, and for the most part, it seems like consumers stick with what they're comfortable with.
But it will be interesting, as the year goes on and the profit and loss statements come out for these companies, and the business side of this, continues to be more known, and every little next step in this process that we're watching goes on. So we don't talk a lot of business and dollars and cents around here, but sometimes, to me, it's fascinating, and the way that it influences the games that we play always makes for an interesting discussion.